I've been given this incredible privilege in life to be able to coach in a sport at a high level, that I want to make sure I leave this in the best place possible for the next generations.
US is still building its infrastructure, which is crazy to hear considering World Cups and trophies that we bring home, at least on the women's side. Sorry, men, you'll get there shortly.
My job is just to make sure I support the athletes in whatever decisions they take, and know that I'm here to try and create the best possible national team I can, but I can only do that if it's made up of people that are really happy doing what they're doing.
Welcome to the Soccer Podcast USA. We're continuing the conversation we started last week with Julie Foudy and Lindsey, and at the perfect moment. It's just 1 week away until the U.S. kicks off against Colombia in the SheBelieves Cup. And after a month-long camp, all eyes are on Emma Hayes as she prepares to lead this team towards the next World Cup. You just heard Emma talk about the privilege of coaching this squad and the responsibility she carries. Today, Julie and Lori are back to break it all down, from the SheBelieves Cup to Hayes' early impact and what's next for the women's game in the United States. Now with the SheBelieves tournament that's coming up here shortly, right, in mid-February, where do you see the talent pool that she's brought into the camps here? The kind of player that Emma's looking for that might create that a bit more of diversity. What do you kind of expect at the SheBelieves tournament?
Oh goodness, you're the one who's covering the.
I'll go. I just feel like I talk too damn much. Foudy, shut up so I can get in. Shut up.
Lori on this podcast.
We need your art in the background. That's how we'll know.
I love your little USA soccer podcast in the background, by the way, Unkel, on the whiteboard. I think, that January camp, by all accounts, was something she loved, that she could go literally between fields and have twice as many players to watch and look at. And as I was saying, Emma Hayes has been very vocal about the fact that, for example, our under 23 national team, youth national team on the gal side has hardly any programming. And when you compare that to the best in the world, like Spain and Germany and England, she says they've got all this programming. They're doing all these things to broaden their pool, and we don't have that, which is why that was one of the first things she has implemented as the new women's head coach, is that they're going to broaden that base. They're going to add more programming into the youth national teams. They're going to sync what those youth national teams are doing with the national teams. And having that January camp gave her the ability to look at another, 26 players. And you could argue actually probably more like 40, because you didn't have many of the, typical U.S. players in that we saw at the Olympics or we saw over the fall because of injuries or the need to rest or her need to see more players. And I think all of that is spot on. And that's we'll go into how amazing Emma is, we know. But for her to come in from, a whole different ecosystem, coaching, she's never coached at a national team level. She's been coaching, for Chelsea for so many years and at the club level professionally, to quickly identify, here are the gaps, here's where we need to get better, and implement that again so quickly shows you just how good she is on so many levels.
Yeah, I think, all three of us are very familiar and friends with Emma, and having worked with her, and even just a couple years ago with the Euros and her coming over with us with ESPN. But that was apparent then, right? That she had a pulse, and this is why it was such an important and necessary hire, in my opinion, with Emma, is because not only did she start majority or the bulk of her coaching career here in the U.S., so she had that pulse on what was happening in the American soccer system, but also understanding what Europe is doing, right? And how can you kind of marry the two of those together? And to your point, Jules, it's her ability to come in and I think not only just broaden the pool or who they're looking at, but also actually give players game time. And some of that was out of necessity, as you mentioned, players needing to rest or injury in the fall after the Olympics and a long NWSL season and the World Cup prior, right? I mean, all of that takes a toll, but to bring players in who have done well in the NWSL, it can be challenging sometimes to really broaden that pool and give them quality time on the field in important games, because more and more you're playing in the SheBelieves Cup, right? You want to get the results. Then the Olympics happen, or whatever, the World Cup, all of these different tournaments, there's more and more programming, so it's not as easy. And I think that has been in such a short amount of time for her to hit the ground running and then give players that specific time. I mean, players for so long, I myself included, you're scratching at the surface just to try to get in. And that level of difference between the NWSL and the international play is much more significant than players and just fans realize, right? You need that taste of what it's like, and coaches need to see you at that level. So I think, immense job from Emma so far in just 7 months, if that. It's wild.
It's crazy.
She's like, I'm just going to start with
Not
a gold
surprising,
medal, and
but
then
it's
I'll
still
start from
crazy.
scratch.
Yeah.
30 days in, gold medal. All right, here we go. Now,
Okay,
And then
what's next?
we had Emma on the
just
podcast, and that's what she said. All right, gold medal, check. Let me just completely reconstruct the entire thing. And I'm like, all right, not many people would think of it like that. I mean, Laura, you hit on the head, talking to pro athletes now and how much it's changed, where there's so many players leaving college, so many players, outside the United States who want to come back and play in the United States. This conversation about meaningful minutes is something that I've learned so far in kind of my new role as a president and general manager, how important those minutes are for lack of a better term, a book value of a player, right? So, whether or not I'm going to extend a guaranteed contract or bring someone in as a trialist or get those meaningful minutes, I know that's club specific, but the U23s, I didn't realize we weren't even implementing the U23s until we came in and we're like, we're going to start a U23 program. I'm like, what do you mean we didn't have a U23 program? I'm like, why? Why didn't we have a U23 program?
We did have one. We did have one. We just weren't doing much with it.
Yeah. But if someone needs minutes, I mean, I guess now we know kind of what it is, but for you guys as players and even now looking at it, how we can brush broad strokes, but more specifically, how important is that for our, national team and even our club players to be striving for?
I mean, I don't think it can be overstated how important it is. I mean, I think even just when you just look at the NWSL and, I remember talking with Laura Harvey earlier this year saying they felt like this was really kind of one of the first seasons that they felt like they could bring in 18-year-olds or younger players, right, into their organization and really be able to take care of them, help them develop. And I think, one, that speaks to where the NWSL is. But let's say those players have come from the youth national teams, but maybe aren't quite ready or going to beat somebody out at the senior national team level right now. That's where I feel like the U23 level really helps bridge that gap, because you're still getting international play. I think of Claire Hutton is a player that comes to mind at Kansas City, a midfielder. I think she was excellent this season as a rookie, right? I mean, just didn't seem like to miss a beat as a young player. But, the players that we have in the midfield, was she going to come right in under Emma and step in? That's for Emma to decide. But this U23 level allows for Claire to come in, continuing her national team development, in a lot of ways too, not only just get minutes that are necessary at an international level, but also as a potential leader, because she was starting and playing every game in Kansas City. Can she take that? And then once you step into a senior team eventually, you already have leadership skills, you have the confidence, I think, that instead of having some of maybe that intimidation or trepidation factor that would typically come about. I think all of these things play a huge role in just a bridge into where our senior national team can go.
Agreed. That confidence is huge. And the comfort of just having played at the international level, played in front of big crowds, played for these big moments already. Even though you do them at the professional level, it's still not the same. Yeah. And when
Comfort's
you have
huge.
that under your belt, then you can step much easier into that senior full women's national team with much more confidence. It's a different level, I think.
What's your guys' take, kind of going back to domestic football here in the United States, the take on needing a Division II women's league. Do you think we have it yet? Do you think we can't? I have an opinion, but I wanted to hear yours guys first.
Unkel, let's hear your opinion. You're in the middle of it all right now with another league.
I'm in the middle of all of it. It's interesting because just because I don't have clearance to use her name, but a previous national team coach saying like, Chris, I don't think there's enough talent out there to have a second league. And me kind of just scratching the surface. I'm like, I think there is. And it's only because I just ran statistical numbers. Yeah, that's the dork in me saying like how many women finish playing collegiate soccer and don't even have an opportunity or a chance to play professional soccer in the United States. And between NCAA Division 1 through 3, not even counting JUCO, NAIA, it came out to like 0.3% of women U.S. soccer players in college even have an opportunity to make a roster. And that was with me taking out international player roster spots, right? That everyone's always trying to fill. So, I mean, I think for me, there is a space for and a need for, and I think, you know, at least with the Super League has that opportunity of giving those players who might not have peaked at the age of 19, 20, right, to make an NWSL roster necessarily, or sit second or third, right, as they kind of sit there and, you know, wait and kind of turn into a little bit more of a glorified player is to finally get seen. I think that for me, that's been fascinating. We have more depth than I think even some people within the industry have given ourselves of how much we've developed soccer here in the United States, particularly in the women's game.
I think the overarching, when we started this conversation, this podcast, is just like the belief, right? And also opportunity for young athletes, women athletes, and that's what additional leagues do, is give players opportunity. And if you don't have that, then there'll be somebody that we've missed, right? Or hasn't been able to come through because they didn't, mature at the same rate as somebody else, right? Or get seen, or all of the different things that you can point out that allows players to have a bit of a smoother pathway to get to the senior national team from their childhood, or just play professionally, is now more and more accessible, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, I used to have real concerns, probably even within the last couple of years, of the depth of our of what we had on the women's side, and that has been alleviated quite a bit recently. And in terms of, I do think we just have so many good players in this country, and putting the pieces in place and the puzzle in place has been part of the challenge. But just walking the fields. I have an 18-year-old who's going to college and plays at the ECNL level, and you see just a lot of really good players. It's not always the perfect combination of how clubs put it all together, as we know, and that is messy in itself. But I'm like, damn, there are so many great players, and the diversity of players finally, right? It was so white when I was growing up. I love that I walk a field and I'm like, oh my God, the diversity is fantastic.
Yep.
And that has taken so long. That has taken really decades and decades. So that, I think, is huge as well.
And you both have worn the crest for the U.S. national team. How much responsibility do you guys feel like it was for you as individuals to not just move the game domestically, but globally as well for women footballers?
Jules, you actually did move it, so let's hear it.
The question was, how much responsibility did we feel to move the game forward? Was that the question?
Yeah. How much did you feel any, or was it kind of like we're charging and they're going to follow? Let's go.
No, you absolutely felt a lot of responsibility. I think that was, I think that's actually what I love most about our group, is that they care deeply about leaving the game in a better place for the next generation. That was always what we talked about. Going back to, meeting Billie Jean King and her saying, if you had a blank canvas, what would you put on it? Not for you, but for the next group. And that's what we always talked about as a group. So we were very cognizant of course, winning was, top priority, but winning, and it was always winning, and it was not just, okay, let's win, and regardless of how it looks or how we reach out to people, it was let's win and let's change the culture and landscape and and build a soccer community, a rabid one in this country. And so we spent a lot of time not just discussing it, but doing it, like activating on it, autograph signings and clinics. And I mean, you look at the 99 World Cup, we would joke that, like, literally, do you want us knocking door to door? Because essentially that's about what we're doing, telling people to show up and put butts in seats. So, and it was a labor of love, really. It was us realizing that, and so much of it was fought too behind the scenes with U.S. Soccer on, funding and support. And it wasn't about money to us necessarily, but like, how can you, spend 80% of your budget on a 12-year-old boy versus a 12-year-old girl? And let's do programming for the youth national team level for the girls as well, those kind of things. Understanding, obviously the Federation is here to support all of the soccer players in the United States and encourage all, both boys and girls, to play. So it was something we took to heart, and we were very proud of trying to play a small part, which I think we did, in elevating the game for a lot of girls.
I think playing a small part is a bit humble. I feel very fortunate because my personal journey, I feel like, is a bit more unique because I did cross quite a few paths of where players like Jules' generation, and then my generation with like Abby, Boxy, right? And then even to like Pino, Alex, and their generation to Kelly O'Hara and those players that we're kind of seeing retire now. So my journey, I felt like I could see the progression. But I think the one thing that was so clear when I first stepped in on any sort of, even youth national team, because it definitely filtered down. But when I first stepped foot with like the full senior national team, that is, not only are we going to win, but exactly how Julie said, it's important to win because we need to stay relevant in that regard and top of mind. But also the additional component of that is, and how do you leave this team in a better place for the next generation? And my goodness, that was like, I felt like more than anything, that was felt across the board. And it was something that I carried through all the way through, and all three different iterations of our pro league as well, because it's the same responsibility. The same responsibility on making sure that it's not you that just feels comfortable, it's how does everybody that's involved, and how are we working together to improve. And I think the thing that's been really special about our U.S. Women's National Team, because we have had the platform and won, is how you've seen that globally, translate globally, and the voices of other federations and women's teams, which is just immense and incredible.
Yeah, well, thanks to you too, because I can tell you in this new role position, the number of international players who want to play here in the United States, because of how you guys have created that foundation, moved it, and they said this is, even if they can get paid more money in another league in another country, the number of agents that say they want to play in the U.S. because they've seen what it's done for U.S. players. So thank you to you two, because it makes my job a little bit easier on the GM side of it. But
Nice.
Yeah, I think that's key. That's a key message though as well, right? Because we are seeing Gurma, we are seeing some of these other players, Crystal, right, choosing to go elsewhere for all the reasons that we've talked about. But there are loads of international players that are coming in that are going to, I mean, even if you just look at the final this past year with Orlando and Washington, right? It's Barbara Banda, it's Marta, Shawinga leading with Kansas City, the Golden Boot. I mean, it's incredible, the players that are coming over and competing and leading the league. So I don't think that message, I feel like sometimes that might get muddled or lost when we're seeing players, but that's the excitement of the women's game, right? There's choice.
if I was to give each of you, last question, a blank canvas and say, how would you grow the game of soccer in general in the United States, what would be your answer to that?
Go, Jules.
Oh God, I'm gonna need wine for this. I think fire.
Let's do. Why are we doing this over wine and a fire?
Come on. Why are we doing this over wine and a fire? I can't even think if I don't have wine and a fire. Okay, blank canvas. How would I build it? Obviously, what we're seeing happen at the NWSL level has been something that I would have on my blank canvas. Is that owner? I don't even want to say 2.0 because it's more like 10.0. Owner 10.0 in terms of the iteration of owners we've had over the years. Now you're seeing these owners that are deep-pocketed, yes, but they're also very community-based, very passionate about the women's sports space and building community. And so profit, of course, it's no longer, oh, let's do this because it's the right thing to do or it's a good thing to do. It's let's do this because we can make some money on it, as we know. But I think that you're seeing in the women's game them building out these new teams in terms of infrastructure, stadiums, facilities, right? Look at Kansas City and what they've started, the Longs, Angie and Chris, and building out their own stadium and training facility. And now you're seeing it with other teams going, okay, this is what we want it to look like. So I think that path is, and still, again, we're just scratching the surface on that, which is so exciting. Because I do think it's a totally different template when you own all the shit, right? When it's yours and you're not sharing it or you're not sharing staff. And you're doing it as you want to do it, as it should be done. And I think we're to a place in women's sports where we're seeing the benefits of that. And most importantly, the return on that, the return on investment, which is way up. And there's still a lot, I think, of upside there as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think just from a scheduling standpoint too, right? Like how the ease of that, because we all already have, and we're seeing the investment in the media side of things, but how do you make that much smoother in terms of, creating what matchups you're looking for, right? If you don't own the stadium, that becomes that much more difficult because you're competing second or third all the time to figure that out. The one thing else that I would add is now the infrastructure of academies. How do we help develop young players in a different way? Because I think there's always an aspect of, there's always seems to be a debate as like, is college soccer still relevant? Absolutely. I think there's the more pathways, the better for players. But there is going to be, and I know Emma has talked about this as well, is the need for academies to develop players, to have this kind of more of a seamless pathway, whether you do end up going to college as well, or you go straight into the pros. That just starts to help build out the entire ecosystem in terms of youth national team, playing it professionally, also U20, then the senior national team. The more that we have that infrastructure, I think the better, right? And so Agreed. That would be a part of the blank canvas that I would certainly start to add in.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you, ladies, as U.S. is still building its infrastructure, which is crazy to hear considering World Cups and trophies that we bring home, at least on the women's side. Sorry, men. You'll get there shortly. Thank you guys for being on this as we just really talk about growing the game that we love in the country we love, in the community we love. And thank you to both of you guys for doing that in your own space, your own place. Like, shout out to Julia on your training facility with Angel City now. To your point, owning that infrastructure is so vital to growing this game and building that next population and generation with the academies and more opportunities to get to the highest level through college and whatnot. So thanks, Julie. Thanks, Lori. Fun as always. Thank you for the special hat edition. But more importantly, next time, wine around the fire pit is going to happen. Talk to you guys soon.
Yes, please.
Bye. We need a reunion. Bye. Thank you.
Always insightful and never boring with Julie and Lori. We covered so much ground, but we're not done yet. Here's more from Emma Hayes.
I'm already building on something. I mean, taking on a team like the US Women's National Team, we all know it's sometimes an almost impossible job because everybody expects the team not only to win, but win by multiple goals, win multiple championships again and again and again.
You can now listen to our full unedited conversation with Emma, where we dive deep into her vision for the national team, her philosophy, and what's next for the sport in our country. It's on YouTube and everywhere you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Soccer Podcast USA.